All right, I'm here for the next episode of the Powerless Podcast with Adam Baumel, who is a part of the Abolish ICE Pledge, which is tracking which House and Senate candidates have publicly signed a pledge to abolish ICE. You also, on your socials and everything in between, obviously this is a big tracking movement of kind of accountability for this paramilitary, completely like rights encroaching institution that we have. So I'm happy to have you on to talk all about all of these things. First and foremost, how have you been doing? It's primary season. I'm sure that's like a big moment for organizations like you guys, really pushing these new insurgent candidates, or at least doing pressure campaigns for incumbents to join these pledges. So how's all that been going, and just how are you doing?
It's been insane. I'm doing everything I can to give myself grace, which is obviously easier said than done. But yeah, it's been very, very hectic because on top of this, I also have a day job. I'm producing a documentary that's unrelated to this. I can't say no. So that's kind of where I'm at. But yeah, I know the work's important, so that kind of keeps me going. Like just seeing each time we take a step up, that just gives me more energy to keep going.
Very good. And this is part of the Neighbors Not Numbers grassroots coalition, right? So I guess what I wanted you to kind of, we'll do big picture and then kind of go down to maybe talking about some of the candidates and some of the races going on and kind of what you guys are doing, and maybe some of the on the ground stuff we've seen most recently, especially New Jersey. But first and foremost, kind of take a step back with this organization. I know it's Neighbors Not Numbers, grassroots coalition. Obviously, this is pertaining to the Abolish ICE Pledge. What's the kind of background of this organization, and where do you kind of fit into that framework?
Sure. So we actually started as a 501c4 only about a month ago.
Okay.
So
yeah.
we are in our infancy. Having said that, the Abolish ICE Pledge, as you may imagine, is the first and primary step as of right now, because you can't really reform the immigration system without getting rid of ICE. It's sort of in the same way you couldn't do a lot of things in Nazi Germany without getting rid of the Gestapo. Obviously, there's other moving parts there too, of course. But yeah, I see the American immigration system right now with ICE being functioning similarly to the way the Gestapo was. And I've had people say, are you sure that's like a fair, portrayal? And I said, yes, absolutely. And you could see it going on right now in Delaney Hall. There's people being fed food with maggots. They're not receiving medical care. And this goes down to something as simple as diabetes medication. There's people right now engaged in a hunger strike. And I don't know if you've seen videos. It's everywhere, but it's insane. And then, of course, you have Cory Booker saying things and not saying ICE in his long statements. And how he likes to grandstand. But
We'll get into all that as well. But yeah, in general, it obviously makes sense for sort of like an immigration justice or an immigration accountability or whatever, words you want to throw out there, organization to focus on this first and foremost right now, because for a long time, ICE has been, and we could talk about this too, ICE has been a long-standing issue for much longer than the Trump presidency, but there's no denying that this, got kicked into like the nth degree with a whole host of things, including the prison industrial complex and everything in between over this second administration of his. I guess when you said you started this a month ago, this is kind of a question I'm asking that I know the answer to, and probably a lot of listeners do as well. But you're seeing what's going on. You're seeing over the past year and some change, just like the rampant escalation of ICE operations from Minnesota, which we've seen get a lot of highlight, especially with the murdering of American citizens, to Los Angeles, to Chicago, and now New Jersey is another flashpoint, but it's everywhere. You can see videos, Georgia, Alabama. I had somebody on from Alabama a few months back. He's just a powerlifter guy on the internet that tries to get people into left-wing spaces and kind of justice politics. And the local Mexican restaurant by him was raided, and everybody got just like picked up without them even checking their immigration status and things of that nature, right? So like that's all I'll say. This is everywhere. But what was kind of the idea of taking that energy and not necessarily just going to, and I don't mean the word just to kind of dismiss people, but not just going to protests or not just kind of joining in and on some other broader organizations. What was the idea to actually get this going in this specific vein for Neighbors Not Numbers and the Abolish ICE Pledge?
So of course, I don't want to take any, attention away from what's going on, but I would say the driving influence for me starting this in seeking accountability the way we're doing it was actually Gavin Newsom getting reelected. And many people may recall one of his primary platform positions was enacting a California-based single-payer system. Do they have it right now?
No.
No, they do not. So I was just kind of like imagine if he went on camera looking straight into the camera, sort of like that the West Wing commercial. I don't know if you remember that towards the end.
Yes.
Yeah, and that was a little bit also where I kind of came to this because, I'm a 38-year-old millennial watching the West Wing and all that type of stuff. But so anyway, imagine if Gavin Newsom looked straight into the camera, said, when I get reelected, pledge to enact a single payer system if and when it reaches my desk. And by the way, it did reach his desk, but he vetoed it.
Right.
So it just adds that extra layer of accountability that I think you need with politicians. Granted, they're not all dishonest, especially not right up front. But as time goes on and their laurels get eroded, I think you need things like this to really enforce that accountability in ways that maybe they don't even want, or maybe they know they won't want down the road. But the thing is, this is something that we need as a people to know that our politicians are acting in our best interests, not theirs.
Yeah, it goes back to something that I believe in more than just, and I keep using the word just, I need to come up with other words, but instead of just supporting grassroots candidates, which I think is important, or just, trying to find people with more progressive values, that it's pressure campaigns, right? Because not only can you put people's names on paper saying that they will do this pledge, if they then back out of said pledge, it's not just a flippant thing that somebody can find a clip from that they contradicted themselves on the news. They wholeheartedly signed on to something and fell away from it, and then they can receive pressure campaigns from the public. You've got it all on a website, you've got it all kind of accumulated, and then you can send these things to people to do mass calls or mass emails and things of that nature, right? So it's not just propping up candidates with the right ideals, it's also making sure we have more of a system to hold people accountable. Because I think one thing that has made, and I'm sure this goes to the Newsom thing is a perfect example in a different, on a different issue. This idea of accountability and just hypocrisy, I think, has pulled so many people out of politics, right? When there's no framework for accountability, no framework for something, when somebody steps away from a promise they had on the campaign trail, that breeds apathy or breeds cynicism, as opposed to galvanizing and putting a fire under people, right? That's another aspect of this that's really important. Right.
Absolutely. I think we do get kind of caught up, not all of us, of course, but I think a lot of us get caught up in thinking that only Donald Trump lies when he speaks. I mean, he pretty much lies every time he speaks, granted. But the thing is, he's not the only one. There's plenty of politicians who are dishonest, and they'll say things that they don't intend to actually do. It's lip service, whatever the case may be. But this is the best way I was able to kind of contribute what I thought I could, because I'm not a billionaire. You could probably see from my blank wall, I don't have all those massive books that people always have behind them.
Yeah, that they've never read, right? Yeah.
Exactly. What's that? What, I forget the one that people always have from the guy who basically set up New York. And he built everyone has that book.
Yeah, and no one's read it. Maybe they have. Maybe I'm being an asshole. But yeah.
So I mean, that's the book that everyone has.
Yeah,
That's kind of why I wanted to do this. But also another kind of angle on top of just accountability is that the Overton window needs to shift back left. Now, of course, not just on immigration policy, but I would say very much on immigration policy. Just think of this for a second. Go back to the 1980s in your mind. I was not alive very much in the 80s. I was born in 88. But Ronald Reagan in the 1980s gave amnesty to undocumented immigrants who were here for about 5 years without any violent crimes. How many Democrats are even advocating for that right now?
Yeah, I mean, zero. I mean, well, I shouldn't say zero. Maybe there's
zero.
A few, but
I mean, the squad.
The squad,
I would say is I mean,
yes.
and I would definitely say they're pushing further. I'm not saying all Democrats.
Yeah, sorry, I misspoke there, but yeah.
No, you're good. I mean, it's easy to get
I should say none in leadership. None in leadership are proposing anything close to that. And that is that's something I've heard people point out that is so stark, because we're not handing it to Ronald Reagan there. What we're saying is even Ronald Reagan was like amnesty for people that have not committed violent crimes. And it's like, and half the, at least like, I would say half the Democrats in office, especially those that are sort of part of the, centrist wing or, take corporate money, that kind of thing in border states are like 10 times more hawkish on immigration than like the grandfather of the modern right-wing movement and neoliberalism of the past like half a century. So it is crazy to think about just how far things have been pulled and where that Overton window is. That's something that I talk about a lot to people that are very like what I would say cynical of electoral politics. Is it's not expecting politicians, regardless of their ideology purported on the campaign trail, to like create this utopia society. It's pulling things to where the window of discussion is somewhere on justice, right? Like, and that's a big part of this again, is just like, this has not existed for forever. ICE has not existed. ICE is younger than I am, younger than you are by, I think it's 11 years younger. I was born in 92 and I think it came out in 2003, 2002, I think, something like that.
03. Yeah.
Yeah, 03. And it's like, that doesn't mean it needs to exist. And there were systems before that weren't perfect, but they certainly were not this militarized, fascist military going around and picking people up for what are often civic offenses. Like, that's another element of it, right? It's a civic offense and they're doing this sort of criminality to people.
100%. And not only that, a lot of the reason why these human beings, I don't want to refer to them as undocumented immigrants right now, because they're human beings.
Yes.
But these human beings are held in detention centers because, guess what? Private prison industry, GEO. I forget the name of the other one, but they make anywhere from $150 to $200 for each individual person held in those detention centers. Why do you think they're being held there as long as they are and not even being deported? And I'm not advocating for deportation, of course. I mean, there are some stories even where there was a 4-year-old child, I believe they had cancer. There was another 10-year-old child who had cancer. Their parents were deported. And it was actually on that Surrounded. I don't know if you ever watched that show.
Yes.
Where everyone sits around. It was, I forget the guy's name. He's like the guy who says, oh, I'm a liberal, like a classical liberal. Anyway, he used to be on TYT.
Yeah. Was it Dave Rubin? Is that who you're talking about?
Rubin.
Yeah.
That's
Oh my God. That video is terrible. But anyway, yes, continue.
So anyway, the reason I mention this is because it was brought up that those two children had their parents deported. And Dave Rubin was like, well, don't you want to keep families together?
Reach the 3,500 mark. If someone is changing the law to make someone that has legal status illegal,
hold on. Are you
that's
saying
not coming after people who came here illegally?
You're saying we're deporting legal.
We're actually deporting
American
U.S. citizens. We deported a 4-year-old kid with lung cancer. We deported a 10-year-old kid
You're talking about because the
with
father.
brain cancer.
If you're talking about
they
because the
deported
father
a 10-year-old kid with brain cancer.
But you're talking about because the father
kid.
was illegal and they didn't want to break up the family. Correct?
Was the kid an American citizen or not?
By the law of the United States, if the kid was born here by birthright citizenship, then he was. But are you saying
why are you deporting an American citizen?
Because they were deporting the father.
Why are you deporting? The reality is that the kid is an American citizen.
No.
Why are you deporting an American citizen
Unless
you are ignoring the material reality?
You want to separate the father from the child?
No, but if they are receiving medical treatment, life-saving medication in a first world country, granted one of the worst healthcare situations in a first world country, I think it'd be
I just want to make sure
Sweden.
we're talking about the same case. So in this specific case, you grant that the father was illegal, right?
We're talking about multiple cases. There's a 4-year-old kid with lung cancer, a 10-year-old kid with brain cancer.
The father was illegal, correct?
From my understanding, one of the parents was not documented immigrant.
So they didn't want to break up the family. I don't think you would want to do that, and I
okay,
wouldn't
if
want
they
to do
were
that.
acting in the best interest of the child, why were they withholding medication while they're in detention?
We got to pause here.
Again, the father was illegal. They didn't want to break up the family.
I'm like, yeah, we could have kept them together in the United States where they could get adequate treatment for their, for their diseases that they need to be saved from. And your logic is that we want to keep them together, but send them back to the countries that Donald Trump calls shithole countries. That's where you want to send them. So where's this hypocrisy come to an end? Where does honesty come in? So that's kind of, and it's not just that, of course, but like these are singular situations where there's certainly many, many more that we are not speaking of.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been numerous stories as well of, and I mean, we could go over these all day, but I say this specifically for children of numerous, I work with, in my day job, I work with people with disabilities, and there was numerous accounts of nonverbal children with autism by themselves without a communication device, without anyone there to know how to communicate or know their needs or whatever, know their dietary restrictions or what they're willing to eat, to where like a kid went 7 days without using the bathroom and didn't eat any food while he was detained, and it was only a local pressure campaign that got him out, right? And it's this notion, I think, that goes back to what you're talking about at the start of this, is like, you're not somebody that very few of us that talk about single issues are like single issue people. But the thing is, this is not a single issue. This is talking about ableism. This is talking about breaking up families. This is talking about economics. This is talking about everything in between, because from every angle, this is impacting communities, impacting people in a negative way. And of course, above all, is completely immoral. But yeah, it's just like that sort of brain rot. It makes you wonder like where humanity is for these people that say these things, because like it just astounds me, and maybe it's because I'm some progressive guy and I just don't get it, not to sound like all holier than thou to these people, but like I genuinely don't understand how the first instance you hear of like in Delaney in New Jersey of like maggots in food. Like, how do you not instantly just think, well, if I was handed food with maggots, that would be extremely disgusting and dehumanizing, and I would want to like fight back instantly. Like, it's just like I don't understand where this can come from for people. It's astounding.
And not only that, I mean, the one metric I would say objectively we lead the world in is imprisonment. Like, that's the thing that I make this kind of flippant remark, but like we should be revolutionizing how good our prisons are if we intend to, house so many people in a jail cell. And of course, like that's not what I'm advocating for. But if you're going to do this to people, at least treat them like human beings in there. You shouldn't be putting them in a jail cell to the point where they're going to die in there, get raped in there. So there's been not even women, young girls getting pregnant in ICE detention centers. And that, of course, that's not only that. There's been, I want to say like 25 or maybe even higher now, people that have died in detention centers when this easily could have been avoided. And one of those main reasons is the contracts for the medication, like the medication contracts expired. And they just were like, it's cheaper not to have medical contracts. That's why they're not treating them. So who knows how cheaply they're getting the food, that's maggot infested. They are literally doing everything they can as cheaply as possible so they can make as much as possible. So this is just another way in which capitalism can be a scourge on people.
Yeah, and to that point, specifically, again, talking, because I'm not entirely sure this is, to varying degrees, we know this happens in prisons everywhere, but obviously we're talking specifically about ICE detention centers. In New Jersey, a lot of people were confused at first that I had spoken to, or that I had seen online, that like don't follow this stuff as closely, when they talked not just about the hunger strike that was going on, but the labor strike. And they're like, well, what do you mean labor strike? And you look into it, and they do the janitorial duties, they do the cafeteria work, they literally, like, the GEO makes these people do the labor to do the upkeep of the ICE detention facility that they're held in for $1 a day, which sometimes they don't even pay them the dollar. Right. And this is something where I had seen some other articles where, much like our other prisons, especially if you go to some for-profit ones, especially in like the South, like there's some notorious ones in Alabama and things of that nature, where it's like your desks in your school are built by prison labor. It's also happening in ICE detention facilities. So just like the mere fact that we're hearing and talking about labor strikes from people that are being detained, they are not, they're there for ostensibly from an administrative warrant, not a warrant for your arrest, and they might not even really have that for these people, and they're getting slave labor. Like, it's slave labor that we're talking about, right?
And on top of that, they're not allowing elected officials in, they're not allowing press in, because they're trying to hide this. But I mean, the weird thing is that they're doing everything they can to hide what's going on inside the detention centers. And then they are not holding back whatsoever in the way that they're brutalizing journalists, human beings. I mean, I've seen them shoot like pepper balls at children. Mm-hmm. There's been people who've been maimed, people who've lost their eyes because of like this kind of militarized treatment of our own people. It's I don't even know a word I could use. It's insanity.
Yeah. To put it mildly, right? Yeah, we lack the vocabulary for these sorts of things. Nazi-like, I think, is a solid connection to make.
Touche.
To get into the Abolish ICE Pledge, and you're tracking kind of what this organization is doing on the tracker front, or on the kind of following the electoral politics side, which is where you can enact change and try to get different candidates and things of that nature. What's kind of been your and we could talk about some specific races as well. I know there's a lot going on. There was a lot going on last week. There's certainly ones in New Jersey and California and all that kind of stuff going on right now. But what's kind of been your sense? Is it that you're primarily reaching out or speaking with insurgent candidates? Have you talked to kind of what's been the response from politicians or from kind of the electoral sphere with this kind of pledge that you're putting out there to their teams and things of that nature?
So it does kind of go against, I guess, what you might say is my own personal interests, not personal interests. And I want to make sure I explain this properly, because that probably is a weird way to say that. Like, I'm not a single issue person. Like, I care a lot about what's going on over on the other side of the world with Israel and Gaza, economics, etc. But with this hat that I wear, I'm focusing on immigration and, of course, abolishing ICE. So I guess you could say I'm not looking as much at the other issues. And also, this might be perhaps something that people are not used to, but we don't actually endorse candidates. We are basically just giving candidates our stamp of approval on this single issue. So just to give you kind of a bizarre example, we almost had Maureen Galindo about a month and a half ago take the pledge. She hadn't sent any of those things out in public yet, the things about putting Zionists into concentration camps, castration, things like that.
Yeah.
But she was someone we were talking to take the pledge. And I would not have said she shouldn't take the pledge just because I disagree with her rhetoric on other things. And in fact, I wouldn't be opposed to Republicans taking the pledge. I mean, Seth Moulton actually spoke out in favor of abolishing ICE. Granted, he's not the easiest person in the world to reach because he's kind of, gotten up there a bit in Massachusetts. But we're not going to turn anyone away. We're not looking to be a gatekeeper. We are looking... The central message of the Abolish ICE Pledge is making people realize that this is the moderate position. It's the moderate position. So, I mean, if you look at the polling, whether it's Democrats, independents, moderates, even like quite a few Republicans support abolishing ICE. Don't just take what you see on the internet as gospel.
Yeah, wait, you're telling me that Twitter is not the real consensus of political thought? Because if you go by like the worst tendencies of both algorithms and humans on the internet, boy, you see some horrible stuff. But that is not the case. From your website, 65% per this is back in February of 2026, so before even the most recent atrocities that we've seen come out of New Jersey and things of that nature. 65% of the public says that ICE has gone too far. And then there's a YouGov poll that 50%, so half the country from March of 2026, say that they support full abolition. And this is something I've noticed, which I think is good, but it's also why an organization like yours is important, is we're seeing it's kind of to attribute it to another issue that you and I both just said that we care deeply about, which is Gaza and Palestine and the genocide going on there. Is politicians can kind of put their finger in the wind and see where the wind's blowing and say the right thing, right? We've started to see more and more people much too late when it comes to Gaza start saying what people have been saying since, November of 2023 in a lot of cases, right? So I say that to say, like, you've seen more and more sort of Democrat kind of just kind of party liners, I would call them, give harsher rhetoric, but then their track record is that they've funded ICE each time, or like they're new, when they're doing negotiating bills, they're talking about, well, the money's already out there. What are you going to do? Right. So the public opinion is shifting. Their rhetoric is shifting, but it's about much more than their rhetoric. It's about their votes that they do on the House floor and in the Senate. Right.
100%. I mean, I forget exactly the way we quote it on the website, but like we're not looking for a slogan. We're looking for action. Because I mean, I know we kind of touched on it earlier, but politicians will say whatever they think you want to hear, and hopefully they actually believe what they're saying. Obviously, it's not always the case. It's almost never the case with certain politicians. But like, this is what we can do without having billions of dollars to make the system better just by buying it to go in the right fashion. This is just, I guess you could say, the best way citizens, or not even just citizens, but people, just people on the ground could actually do the work and just push that accountability on these politicians who are perhaps not always so used to having to be held so accountable.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit promising for all of us that are extremely skeptical of these people with whatever they say way too late. That like nowadays we have these mechanisms like yourselves, or I've had somebody else on for a different organization, much like this sort of pressure campaign of citizens impeachment, where it's like, all right, you said you're going to do the thing, we're getting you there. You better do the thing, or we're going to come after you, type deal, right? Like we've got the receipts, so to speak. Well, let's get into a few and a few of these races coming up. I'm sure you've got quite a bit that you're looking at over the past couple of weeks as we get more and more into primary season. But what are some of the candidates you've seen that are promising, sort of in their primary races? Or let's start off with, what are a few that have won that you've been following over the past couple of primary cycles that we do endlessly in a midterm year and all these different things? We're a few that have won, and what's the framework that you're seeing in sort of these primaries? Is it an uphill battle, much like it is sort of like with the Palestine issue, or has it been more overwhelming that these candidates are getting on the up and up of winning in their primaries?
So it's definitely, I would say, an uphill battle. Again, we are still in our infancy. So there's people who have been a little more hesitant to jump on board. And I don't blame them, because there's certainly some organizations out there who are not so honest. So I don't blame them for that. But like, once we got our website up, it got much easier. And then once we became a 501c4, it got much easier. So it's kind of like step by step getting better. I would say kind of a big shift in the way we're able to do our work was Colin Allred moving to the left on immigration. And I don't want to, I'm not trying to say anything to disparage him necessarily, but he voted in favor of Laken Riley. I don't know what's much worse than that. However, I'm willing to let people change, especially if it's going to be changing for the better.
ICE is terrorizing our communities and killing Americans. It's horrifying, being put in danger by Trump and by our own government. It's past time to abolish ICE and to prosecute every agent who breaks the law.
So him taking the bold position of supporting the abolition of ICE among our other tenets of our pledge makes me think, okay, so he was wrong there, but he's working to be better. And that's what, when people think of these purity needs of our candidates, it's obviously used in like a negative way, but I think they can still get more pure. Like it's not like you're stuck in like a static mode. They can certainly get better if you push them to get better. Like, and that's why we all need to be so active in our politics, is because when there's enough pressure, politicians will move because they want to keep their job.
Well, and at the end of the day, that's, hypothetically what they're, when I was talking about, putting their finger up into the wind to see where things are going, in some ways that is their job, right? In some ways it's supposed to go, my constituents are for this, so I'm going to do what the constituents want because I want to keep my job, right? And that sort of transactional relationship, while it doesn't feel the most moral or the most principled, it can be used to your advantage, right? Just like it gets used to Republicans' advantage, or I should say, like the far right movement, not advantage, like in a very negative way from our viewpoints, right? So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I actually didn't realize that he had shifted on that. So that's a good point of like, when you're able to do these sort of, I hate using the phrase over and over again of single issue, but single issue pressure campaigns, it can make a difference on people that you would otherwise just view as like out of the loop. We're not going to like this is a lost cause. Somebody voting for the Laken Riley Act and then changing on this issue basically for fear of non-electability shows more of the power of grassroots than it does of the politician, right?
Absolutely. I also do want to give a shout out to candidates, even these candidates in some cases that have been eliminated. So in Texas, how they have like a runoff system. One of the ways in which we got to Colin Allred was in one of the eliminated candidates in his race. And I feel like I'm going to butcher his name. I believe it was Hafish. Zamed, if I recall correctly. And again, please, if he sees this, I hope he's not too upset with me if I mispronounce his name. But he's kind of been our intermediary to get me in touch with this campaign and got him on board. So candidates can play a significantly larger role than just winning their races. They can absolutely open doors and connect us and put us in touch with people that we haven't been in touch with yet. And that's kind of the main step that we really need to make, is having that first conversation. If they're open-minded to it, I'm fairly confident in my ability to convince them.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense, and it, again, gives constructive hope to people that otherwise might be completely, understandably black-pilled in some ways on this entire electoral process. From, I guess, I'm trying to think the best way I want to go next about this, but aside from this tracker that you have for as of now you have 65 candidates that have taken the pledge. As of now, you've had 5 primary winners, 25 states represented, so over half of not over, but half the country to some extent has candidates that have taken this pledge. What's another side of, like, what can people that want to be involved in this issue or are involved on kind of the pressure campaigns in other ways, whether it's protesting outside of the local ICE facility, and here in Illinois that's been the case near the Chicago area. There was a candidate, Katabu Ghazali, and several others that just had their federal case thrown out, which is great because they went after them pretty vociferously. What, from your guys' angle, from this Abolish ICE pledge and from your organization, how can that be in tandem with some of these typical pressure campaigns that we're seeing on the ground outside of the facilities? Like, what can people that are sort of in the know or really involved in this advocacy for these people's rights and their humanity, how can they sort of utilize your organization or your tools you have at your disposal on your website to further the cause?
That's a great question. So we are still in the process of building out our infrastructure, as you may imagine. However, we have some plans in mind that we are working to implement. So for instance, you can put in your zip code, and this is actually already on the website. You can put in your zip code and you can see all the federal level legislators that you would interact with. And we're trying to basically make it easier for, just simple, not simple, but like for people to be able to reach out to legislators. Because the thing is, we can't reach out to every single one on our behalf. We need people to kind of join together and take on this mantle collectively. Because that's how this all gets done in a democracy, is by people actually joining up together and putting that pressure. So that's one way in which you could do it. We also did start a petition. So of course, the larger that petition gets, the easier and easier it will be. And that petition, we are looking to kind of I forget what the term is, but basically we'll be able to see where petition signers sign that petition from. So once it gets large enough, we'll be able to show these either elected officials or candidates how many people sign that petition in their area. So they'll be able to see the actual interests, in action, and say like, oh, maybe I should be actually taking this position because my constituents, that's where they are and that's where I need to be. And of course, there's other ways as well, but I would say those are the most prominent ways as of right now. And we're still in the process of kind of building out, other mechanisms.
Well, to that point, you say, this has been going on. You said, I think, for about a month that everything's kind of been fully launched, and you're building the infrastructure for it. What are some of the goals, or what are the aspirations that you're talking about continuing to build this infrastructure out to push for abolishing ICE and getting these people out of these internment camps and concentration camps and all these different things? What's kind of the goal to broaden this out and to advance this organization?
Well, I do want to be very transparent. We see this as a long game. It's not like a single cycle. I mean, of course, the next cycle, which will be the presidential election, we're definitely doing what we can to hit the ground running and have that strong foundation. So we go into the presidential election cycle with the possibility of getting actual presidential candidates. So right now, we're focusing primarily on challenging candidates, because there's plenty of elected officials that we know will be able to reach and are very likely to be sympathetic to our cause. They've already, like for instance, the squad. I don't think there's a single member of the squad that hasn't just explicitly said they want to abolish ICE. Right. So there's no reason to believe they won't be interested in signing the pledge as well. And again, we're hoping that there's significantly more, candidates that are getting elected that'll be able to give them a hand and take that cause on. Because of course, the squad can't do this on their own. They can't. So we are hoping to have somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40, not candidates, elected officials that have taken the pledge before the presidential election cycle.
It's a great goal because that can, that's like you said, that's one thing that I think has been very frustrating about, what people refer to as the squad, not the people within that sort of, framework or ideology themselves, but that, sometimes they're having to fight at odds with the supposed progressive caucus, right? The Congressional Progressive Caucus, which will have people that have supported ICE and supported mass funding to Israel and things, which really takes away what the word progressive means. But I digress from that point. But to have like a block of 40 people, if it's a Democrat, say it's, you could get Republicans, this is a nonpartisan issue, right? Or a nonpartisan organization. But because I saw you've had a couple of independents as well. But if you have a block of 30, 40 people, and you're trying to get through the agenda of the first 100 days of the new Democrat president or whatever the case may be, that applies a lot more pressure than 6 to 10 people, right? You would fundamentally have to give major concessions to that block of abolish ICE candidates, right? Like that would be a fantastic road to where you're not talking about that you have to get every Democrat or a majority of the House, the Senate or whatever the case may be, but you can put in huge hindering stepping and roadblocks unless they meet some of your demands on this issue at the very least, right?
Absolutely. And as I mentioned before, we see this as the moderate position, and we've already seen some more moderate politicians coming out in favor of abolishing ICE. Like, as I mentioned before, Seth Moulton has just explicitly said he wants to abolish ICE. I think it was on Zateo, if I recall, with Mehdi Hassan. So that's an example. Another example, again, I keep saying, as I said before, but Colin Allred was what you might call a more moderate Democrat. And I don't know if I would say like he's like a fire-breathing lefty now or something like that, but he's found his way to the right position on immigration. And I have no reason to believe that this won't spread like wild.
Yeah, just because, as you said, and I would go to venture that polling, if you pulled up similar ones from like a more recent time, I'll probably throw some on the screen on the edited side of the things, would be higher. It's not going to, this is not an issue, much like Gaza. This is not an issue where like the public's going to circle back to the status quo. Like the cat's out of the bag. It's over, right? Like the public opinion on this is insurmountable. I mean, I work in a, like I said, I live in Illinois, but I work in an extremely conservative area of Illinois where I think Trump won at all elections like 60% in the presidential election, which people outside of Illinois can't believe that happens, but that happens in a lot of places outside of Chicago. It's just nobody else lives in these areas, so it doesn't matter for winning the state. But I digress. But I'll talk to random people and they'll just be astounded that this is happening. We've had raids happen in nearby towns here in like relatively small towns, like I was talking about with the friend that I talked about from Alabama. It's all that to say, this is like a mass mobilization issue. Like that story I was talking about in Alabama. There's enough people that probably liked going to that restaurant that they're just like, that guy was a great cook. Why did you take that person away from our community? Like that kind of thing. It's affecting so many communities on a personal level that a lot of people that are maybe less political or really only focus on, taxes or get misconstrued things from mainstream media on what they should care about. When it affects you personally and you can actually see people gone or people frightened that you personally know, in this country, that makes that's a big deal to where all of a sudden people view things in a much more humane way. So all that to say is like, this has affected so many people, has affected so many people's wallets as well, and all these different things, that there's just no way people can think this is going to go back, right? Like you can't have a Democrat come in, say in 2028, like we were talking about with kind of the larger scope of this organization, and say, well, we're going to go back to like 2015 era numbers for this. It's like, well, we still saw kids in cages at that time. Like that's not like, this has been a long standing crisis and people are just finally opening up to it because it's become so barbaric, right?
Absolutely. And that's actually one of the reasons why I give AOC so much credit. I want to say she was calling to abolish ICE back in like, what, 19, I think it was.
It was pretty early on in her, when she was like a freshman congressman almost, or something like that, I want to say. Yeah.
Yeah, because she was elected in 2018, if I remember correctly. So she was calling to abolish ICE in her first year in office. Again, someone can feel free to fact check me if I'm wrong there. But I mean, I know it was a while ago. It was a while ago when she was calling for that, and that was considered the fringe position. Not anymore. Not anymore.
No.
Especially in the Democratic Party, especially among independents and moderates, it's definitely a position that's becoming the moderate position. And that's the point I just keep sending home to people, because moderation is not what we kind of portray it as in this country, where it's like, oh, it's just the middle. It's like kind of being kind of neutral on everything. I'm like, no, that's not moderate. That's not the moderate position. Moderate is kind of just where, kind of like the bell curve, where most people are. And I think that, our political education in this country could really, could really use some sprucing up to make people aware of that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And that's the one silver lining you can find from an administration that's so barbaric, is that it's shining a light on things that have been a problem for a while, but they've been kind of in the shadows for a lot of people, and are certainly in the shadows, I would say, when the opposition parties, the Republicans, like during a Democratic administration, right? I was just looking, I was surprised to see, I kind of forgot about this, that after some of the stuff in Minnesota, my own governor, who is by no stretch of the billionaire in Illinois, the billionaire governor, has called for abolishing ICE. I kind of forgot about that. And it's like, yeah, to that point, it's like, if a billionaire mogul that's running his state can say that, I'm pretty sure we can get a lot of other people on board that are running for federal office, right? Well, Adam, thanks so much for going over all of this. I would love to have you back on at another time when we're talking more about general elections, or certainly when we get closer to 2028 and all those different things. But can you go ahead and I just want to make sure when we sign off here, to just make sure to have everybody know what you want to kind of pitch them about the organization, how they can help, and where they can find you all.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, let me just let everyone know what the website is. It's triplenc.org. So it's TRIPLE, N as in November, C as in Charlie.org. And I hate that I even have to mention this, but as a brand new nonprofit, we desperately need to raise money. Now, raising money can do a lot for us. It'll give us the ability to travel, like actually get boots on the ground and actually show up to things like what's going on in New Jersey right now. It'll give us the ability to create ads highlighting negative candidates that need to be shown to the light of day. So again, please, if you can, even if $1, $5, whatever it is, any amount will go a very long way. But even if you can't do that, you could still share what we're doing on Instagram. You could share what we're doing on Facebook. I think we're on Twitter, but we may have been banned on Twitter again. Who knows? I don't think Musk is a fan, but
yeah, I would venture to say that he probably isn't on the same side ideologically as this project. Maybe just jumping out there with that one. Yeah,
probably not. No, but yeah, we definitely need to make an army out of this, because me by myself in my one-bedroom apartment in Tallahassee, I'm not gonna be able to solve this by myself. I need millions and millions of people to realize, like, I'm pissed off about this, and this is at least one of the ways in which this country is really messing up.
Absolutely. You can do everything from read their mission statement, talking about why they're organizing, the principles that they have, as well as, the things that we spelled out today of why we should abolish ICE. You could see where candidates can take the pledge. So if you know of candidates or primary candidates or elected officials that are running in the general, you could send this over to them and kind of do a campaign that way. You could check the tracker to see who in your area might be running on this platform, as well as others that you can support and read. I think this is a very impactful and good tool that you have on the website, as well as some of the stories that have come out of the detention facilities, which are sometimes, you're not always seeing the amount of stories and depravity coming out, other than some of the very, bigger profile ones that we've seen in major news reporting. And so all that to say, along with the donate page, all that to say, this is a great tool for people to check. You should definitely follow you on Instagram and other social media, which will all be linked below. And I really appreciate your time. All the best with this organization. Like I said, I'd love to have you come back on another time at a later date to kind of check in on this. And unfortunately I'm sure we'll have some other stories on this, but maybe we can have the hope that we'll have some great progress to talk about as well. So thanks so much for your time. And I really appreciate you coming on to break all this down.
Absolutely, again. And thank you so much for having me, Brandon. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.